Hey everybody, and for people who are going to be coming to join us later, a lot's been on my mind. I see that the Trump campaign or Trump administration is moving quickly to put in place the most incompetent people that they could possibly find. I think they do that twofold. Is one, because they don't really want anybody competent, and two, they are following the playbook of Vladimir Putin, who does what they call crony, I don't want to get capitalism, but crony partnerships. They're looking for someone who's loyal to him as opposed to looking for someone who's competent. And that way he can control things in Russia, and I assume that's what Trump's trying to do here. I saw something from Ron Philippic, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he's a Midas Touch guy, the attorney out of Florida. He mentioned today that, and I didn't see it because I'm not really one for spending a lot of time looking at Trump or paying attention to him and looking about how we can defeat him. But he said that Trump was talking about putting together some free universities, and I'd seen that before, that they wanted to offer a post-secondary education or a college education to people for free. Of course, it'll be an indoctrination school. And that's partly why you see J.D. Vance and a lot of the other elites trying to badmouth the foundations, the Harvards, the Yales, the Princetons, the Berkeleys, the Stanfords, all of them, because they want to have their own indoctrination for college students. If you think about this, these guys are putting together a total comprehensive plan. And they're sort of following the playbook of Hungary, and that's why he works so closely with Viktor Orban. So I pulled this up so you guys take a look at it. Maybe you were or weren't aware of it, but one of the first things that Viktor did when he took over Hungary in, I think, 2010, the second time. He was elected once before and lost, and then came back and is destroying the country. But one of the things they did is he gave the colleges an offer they cannot refuse. Fidesz is his party, like the Republicans here. And he pretty much told the universities that, hey, you're going to do it our way. We're going to overtake you and privatize secondary education or collegiate education, which is what they've essentially done, which is what Trump wants to do, because they're making college here so expensive, so unable to be attended, that people who want to go to college are only going to be able to go to the colleges that are funded by the federal government, which is going to be giving them conservative propaganda talk. So I see that as part of the entire plan of what they're looking to do. So I brought that up today because I saw that Ron had brought that up, and I just wanted to confirm that that is actually true. This is part of their overall effort. And the other thing I wanted to show you is to start, and then I'm going to show you a video. Unfortunately, it's about 9 minutes long, but sort of covers what we're going to talk about today, and then I'll get in more details after we're done. And I'll obviously stop and take some questions if there are any. If you have any questions, go into the chat room and put a Q first so that I know that it's a question as opposed to a comment. That would be helpful. Danube, I don't know how to pronounce that, but Danube Institute is a Hungarian organization. It is their heritage foundation, if you will. And you can see they're gleefully gloating about MAGA coming back. They have something called Make Europe Great Again. So they're all piggybacking off each other, and they're very excited that Trump 2.0 is coming to destroy us, but they think it's a good thing for Hungary. So anyhow, I just wanted to share that with you, and we'll talk about a few other things on the other side of the video. And I really like, if you have any questions, put them into the chat. When you watch the video, what I'm going to be asking you at the end of this video is, what things do you think that I may have missed? Are there any other areas that you think that they might be able to pursue that could, put the hurt on us as people of opposition, or those like the states that are going to be trying to defend against some of the horrendous things coming our way? So really, this is a collaborative effort. I'm really relying on others to contribute their great brain power to think this through. So I'll see you on the other side of the video.
Welcome back, everyone, to our ongoing series on Project 2025. My name is Vanessa, and today we're diving deep into one of the most potent tools a rogue executive could wield: legal manipulation and judicial activism. This isn't just about passing laws or making decrees. This is about using the very framework of our legal system to punish enemies, discourage opposition, and ultimately consolidate power. Imagine a world where the courts no longer serve as an impartial check on power, but as a weaponized branch of the executive, rubber-stamping policies and ruling against those who stand up for democratic values. This isn't just theory. It's a tactic authoritarian leaders have used throughout history, and if we're not vigilant, it could become our reality. Let's start with judicial packing and partisan appointments. We've seen this happen at various levels, from local school boards to federal courts. A rogue executive with an authoritarian agenda doesn't want an independent judiciary. They want a compliant one. By fast-tracking judicial appointments, a rogue executive could fill the courts with loyalists who are ideologically aligned with their agenda. Judges in these positions aren't necessarily chosen for their legal expertise or commitment to constitutional principles, but rather for their willingness to protect and advance the executive's vision. Example? Look at Viktor Orbán in Hungary. Orbán packed Hungary's constitutional court with allies, ensuring that his policies would face little to no opposition from the judiciary. His government even lowered the retirement age for judges to create more vacancies, allowing him to fill those seats with loyalists. In the United States, imagine a similar scenario. Judges appointed solely based on their loyalty to a particular agenda, willing to overlook clear abuses of power or rule against civil rights protections simply because they align with the executive's goals. When courts are stacked with loyalists, any attempt by the opposition to challenge the executive's policies becomes an uphill battle. Think Judge Cannon in Florida, who dismissed all charges against Trump in his stolen classified documents case. Next, let's talk about flooding the legal system, a tactic that's all about overwhelming opponents. This strategy is inspired by initiatives like Project Blitz, which introduced waves of bills at the state level to overwhelm opposition groups. The goal? To introduce so much legislation that defenders of civil rights simply cannot keep up. A rogue executive with control over the Department of Justice could use this same strategy on a massive scale. Imagine the DOJ, IRS, or even state attorneys general launching countless investigations, lawsuits, and legal challenges against organizations, leaders, and activists who oppose the administration. Civil rights groups like the ACLU or advocacy networks could be forced to respond to dozens, if not hundreds, of simultaneous cases, draining their financial and legal resources. It wouldn't even matter if these lawsuits are weak or frivolous. The objective is to spread the opposition thin, forcing them to defend on multiple fronts. And while they're busy putting out legal fires, the administration can continue pushing through its agenda with minimal resistance. Think about it. If the ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center, and similar organizations are bogged down defending against countless lawsuits, who is left to push back against authoritarian policies? It's a classic tactic of attrition. Wear down the opponent until they have nothing left to give. The third strategy we need to address is using judicial activism to actively roll back established rights. Normally, judicial activism is seen as judges interpreting the law to expand rights or adapt constitutional principles to modern times. But in the hands of a rogue executive, judicial activism becomes a tool for oppression rather than progress. Imagine a judiciary where partisan judges reinterpret or dismantle key protections in areas such as voting rights, LGBTQ+ protections, and reproductive freedoms. For instance, voting rights could be restricted by upholding new ID requirements, limiting absentee ballots, or gerrymandering districts to disenfranchise certain populations, all upheld by a partisan judiciary. Imagine a scenario where states enact extremely restrictive voting laws, and the Supreme Court, stacked with loyalists, rules that these laws are constitutional. Over time, these rulings set legal precedents that make it almost impossible for future administrations to reverse. Slowly but surely, the judiciary becomes a powerful tool to erode civil liberties under the guise of legal interpretation. Now let's consider the role of federal law enforcement agencies like the DOJ and FBI. A rogue executive with an agenda to consolidate power could direct these agencies to investigate and prosecute opposition groups, activists, and political rivals. Imagine the chilling effect if the DOJ were instructed to prioritize cases that align with the executive's political interests. Investigations could be opened against activists, journalists, and organizations that criticize the administration, while allies of the executive are given a free pass. We would see a two-tiered justice system where opposition voices are silenced through targeted harassment, and political allies are shielded from accountability. Let's take a look at the case study of Erdogan's Turkey. After the failed coup in 2016, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan used federal law enforcement to detain tens of thousands of people, journalists, academics, activists, and even judges, accusing them of undermining the state. This tactic sent a clear message: dissent would not be tolerated. Even with a loyal judiciary, sometimes the executive needs to bypass the courts altogether. This is where executive orders come in. Executive orders have their place in governance, but they can also be exploited to push through policies that might not stand up to judicial scrutiny. A rogue executive can issue executive orders to enforce restrictive policies immediately. In a worst-case scenario, the courts are constantly on the defensive, responding to new orders as the executive tweaks and reissues them. Meanwhile, the administration keeps enforcing these policies on the ground, making it incredibly difficult for opposition forces to keep up. Let's turn to a disturbing trend we've seen from the Republican Attorneys General Association, RAGA. RAGA has been instrumental in filing amicus briefs that support extreme partisan positions, including efforts to undermine democratic norms and even support actions that could be seen as insurrectionist. Through these coordinated actions, RAGA has been involved in lawsuits targeting individuals, businesses, and opposition groups under the guise of state authority. This misuse of legal power effectively silences opposition and intimidates those who speak out against certain policies. Imagine a scenario where state attorneys general actively use their authority to sue activists, media outlets, or businesses that express opposition to the government's agenda. This is not just a misuse of power, it's an abuse designed to send a chilling message. When government officials weaponize their positions for partisan gain, it undermines public trust in the justice system and reinforces the power of the ruling party, discouraging any attempt at opposition. Two additional ways the law can be weaponized include selective enforcement and criminalizing protest. A rogue executive could direct law enforcement to selectively enforce certain laws against opposition groups while ignoring similar actions by supporters. This tactic creates a sense of fear among opposition members, making them hesitant to act even within legal limits. Imagine laws passed specifically to criminalize peaceful protests or increase penalties for minor infractions during demonstrations. This tactic has been used in various states to intimidate activists, making it risky for citizens to exercise their First Amendment rights. We have seen a precursor to this with the overreaction of the police at the university protests earlier this year. Each of these tactics serves a single purpose: to suppress dissent and strengthen control over the population. As we can see, a rogue executive doesn't need to completely dismantle the judiciary to control it. By stacking courts with loyalists, flooding the legal system, weaponizing law enforcement, and using executive orders strategically, they can create a reality where the legal system becomes a weapon rather than a safeguard. This is legal warfare, a war not fought with bullets, but with lawsuits, investigations, and judicial rulings. It's a slow but effective way to consolidate power and silence opposition. If we don't understand these tactics and anticipate how they might be used, we risk losing the democratic foundations we rely on. Thank you for joining us in this critical episode of the series. Next time, we'll continue exploring the structures and tactics that could be manipulated under Project 2025's Pillar 4. Please subscribe, stay informed, and share this with others who are passionate about defending democracy. Knowledge is our first line of defense.
Okay, appreciate you watching that. If you have any questions about some of the things we talked about, please share them with us. Anyhow, I wanted to move on and sort of give you some examples of Project 2025 in action and what I see them doing on a greater scale with Pillar 4. Pillar 4 is the one that has been secretive. that they are going to unveil to us on January 20th at 12:01 p.m. when the felon takes over the presidency again. That's just so hard for me to deal with, but it is what it is, at least for right now. So if you remember back during the police, the student protests earlier this year for Gaza protest, that some cases got out of line, but I think the police overreacted more so than that. But that is sort of a precursor to what's going to be happening in the future. Okay. So that's going to be a precursor to what's happening again in the future. And we need to be aware of that. And one of the things that happened is a lot of the billionaires met secretly with the New York mayor and told them to use force on the protesters. So we only found out about that because of some great investigative reporting. But absent that, we have to recognize that the wealthy are using the police to succumb the population. And that's going to be even more significant with Trump in the presidency, with the military militarized, with the police already militarized. You got the police union supporting the felon. We need to be aware that the wealthy are using the police against us, and they will ratchet that up. So we need to be aware of that. The other thing that they're doing as part of the weaponization of the legal process, and I've been talking about this for years, is that the lawsuits. They file all these lawsuits. The wealthy spend millions of dollars funding these frivolous lawsuits because, one, it makes people fearful of being sued, so they self-censor. That, especially for people who don't have institutional support, like an individual professor or individual student, they're not going to be able to defend against these punitive lawsuits. So they just self-censor or go away, which is exactly what's happened in a lot of cases. But here's ProPublica. They said they had I think it was 6 years being sued, and they finally won. But that cost them 6 years of time, millions of dollars in defense. And if you've ever been in a lawsuit, you know how emotionally draining that is. You know how emotionally draining that is. So it's one of those things that grate on you. And they said after 4, 5, 6 years, whatever it was not something they even felt like they won. If you remember Devin Nunes, the old representative from California, he had like 50 lawsuits. I don't think he won any of them, but it still sends a chilling effect against people. When you're getting sued, you got to defend yourself, and he's not paying for it. I know there's some billionaire behind the scenes that's saying, all right, sue him, because they had the exact same attorney who's filed all the cases, and the guy had like a Gmail account. It wasn't even like a real corporation. It was just some guy who was an attorney who had some client who was funding these lawsuits. These lawsuits were harassment lawsuits, but you still have to defend yourself even in a harassment lawsuit. So that happened, and that's still going to continue to happen. Oh, this is another one. A law that was enacted in Louisiana says that you can't wear a mask. Or not, that's a different one. That you can't film the police if you're too close to them. So that's going to mean that the police have a little bit more ability to do things that may not be up and up, because it's the threat. If you're too close, they can arrest you for being part of the whatever it is. I don't know what the legal term is, but it's just another way for them to put pressure on you as a potential protester or someone who's trying to make sure that they're not doing something that's illegal. It's just a ratcheting down of our civil rights in every capacity, in every way they can do. And even Elon was suing Media Matters. Media Matters is the organization that keeps track of companies and spending and that kind of stuff. So they've been keeping track of the right wing. And when Elon took over, as we all know, there was a torrent of loss of racism and bigotry and Nazis coming up. And if you were a black person or an LGBT person, you were just getting attacked nonstop. And Elon was allowing some of his ads to be these people's posts to be right next to some of their advertisers. So Media Matters brought that up, and Elon sued them, and now they have to defend themselves. And Media Matters had to just lay off 10 or 15 of their workers, people that we know and we follow on Twitter, but they're no longer there because they have to spend the money and time and resources defending against that. So that's part of their strategy. These lawsuits, there's billionaires who can just throw millions to eventually quiet people down from even protesting or even raising the voice. And that happens. We saw that happen with disinformation. I think the Stanford University closed their disinformation lab because they kept getting subpoenaed by Jim Jordan and the Republicans for information and resources, and it just became too expensive for them to spend that money just to report on all the lies that Republicans are telling. But again, that is stopping people from being able to do what they want to do, and they do it by legal recourse. And this is another way that they can use legal means to quiet people down or get people to self-censor, which is happening. This is a Devin Nunes one. This guy sues and sues and sues and never wins anything. Sued CNN. If you go look for Devin Nunes, he sues the Washington Post. He sued for $250 million against the Washington Post. That's just trying to, because all it takes is one of those to win, and the Washington Post is out of business, because $250 million, unless your insurance is going to cover that, is going to be a hard nut for them to pay. Fox might be able to do that because they lie all the time and they get funded differently than a Washington Post does. But you can't take too many of those kinds of hits before it's going to impact your ability to hire people, to keep people, and to stay in business. So that is a strategy that they continue to use. Another strategy that they're doing, I've lost it. Is it behind here? Oh, yes. America First Legal is the one that Stephen Miller is doing, but it's supported by billionaires with their billionaire money, of course, that they're funding this, and they're spending the money to have the attorney generals that are Republican, Texas in this case, sue the Biden administration, to sue whoever they want to sue, and they're using this billionaire money from America First Legal to do the work for them for the state of Texas and other states. It's a process and a system that they're weaponized to use the billionaire money to provide free legal services to the people that are able to have standing to sue to stop things that they do not want. Are we starting to see the picture now? Are we starting to see what they're up to now? Anyhow, upstate New York, I think this is where all the Trumpers live. They have enacted a law that says, and I said this earlier, that you can't have face masks. So why is that? It's not because we have COVID and that's the issue. It's because they want to be able to see people who are protesting. So if you have to take off your mask and you're protesting, now they have a way to come out and harass you later, to arrest you later. Because I'm going to bring up something that not a lot of people have talked about, but it's probably one of the most frightening pieces of legislation that is already in law. It's in Georgia. It's the Georgia RICO. You know that one that Fannie Willis was trying to do against Trump that had 30 people caught up in it? Obviously that's fallen apart because the Department of Justice just couldn't get its act together quickly enough. Anyhow, but the FICO, or the RICO law, it's FICO, that's not my credit score. The RICO law is one that is very expansive in the state of Florida, or state of Georgia. It gives them the ability, in this case, they filed RICO charges against Black Lives Matter protesters. And they said that they're trying to say all 61 of them are guilty, being faced with multiple felonies because of the actions of one. They're saying it's a RICO case, and it's a very, very expansive thing. So a lot of people getting caught up. This is decades in prisons for being a protester. Now, what does that do to them? If they go to jail, obviously that's horrendous, but it's also going to make people fearful of protesting in Georgia. And what one Republican state does, you can rest assured that the other ones will be following suit sooner versus later. So this is one to keep an eye out for them using elsewhere. And the other one I want to talk to you guys about is this one. It's I wouldn't say it's a major win. The McKesson versus Doe case. This is the case where a Black Lives Matter organizer organized a event, a protest, and there was somebody else who caused some damage to someone else, and they wanted to charge the organizer for the crimes of the other person. Again, another example of them trying to stop our ability to protest. Because if you're an organizer and you can get sued or put in jail for the actions of people you have no control over, that is very, very stifling. That will make you be thinking twice about whether or not you want to organize an event. And again, that's another example of those guys using the law and the legal process to quiet dissent, to stifle dissent. That's what they're trying to do. Now, I wouldn't say this is a win. The reason I say it's not a win is that the Supreme Court did not rule on it. They just refused to take it up. The lower courts, at least the lower court in a different lower court, had ruled that they could be sued, and then they went up to the Supreme Court and got sent back down to the lower court, which said that they could not. And anyhow, that's how it's got here, but it has not been definitively ruled by this Supreme Court, which means that these people just didn't take it up. But if these people take it up, that means that if you're an organizer of a protest and someone else, whether it's a real protester or just an insider, an instigator that's coming out there, we know that they do that. They send people to some of these events to mess things up and get things going. If that's the case, you can take out the top protest organizers by having someone else commit some crimes that the organizer will be charged for. So if you look at all these things that these guys are doing across the board, you'll see that there's a concentrated effort to stifle protest, to stifle our ability to dissent. And it's organized. We got to pay attention to that. So in later episodes, we're going to talk about what kinds of things we could possibly do. And I am not an expert, so I'm definitely going to be relying on those of you who are and hear this and see this that might have some ideas about things that we could do. I am super encouraged by the state of California, state of New York, Pritzker, I'm blanking out what state he's from, Washington State, I think even Oregon said the same thing. The West Coast states are pretty much saying, hey, we're not going to just take it sitting down. We're going to protect our citizens. We're going to do that. But there's only so much you can do. And as the video earlier I showed, they could tie states, they can tie organizations, they can tie individuals up in court with multiple lawsuits, multiple actions, and it could be very problematic. So I'm thinking that there should be some kind of coordinated effort even amongst the states to say, all right, I'll take these ones, you take this ones, so that they're not all getting bogged up by the same thing. Because these guys are going to be a lot more organized than they were in 2016 when he became president the first time. They're going to be a lot more organized about how they quiet us down. And I'm just not going quietly. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up, but I want you to be thinking about all the ways that I may have missed that could be included as how they would try to stifle our dissent, because that is really what they want. They want to make sure that we cannot protest what they're doing. And if you can't protest what they're doing, we have essentially become Russia, we've essentially become China, we've essentially become Iran, North Korea, which is what they want. So we have to find ways to fight back